Kansas City, Missouri, this is GovLove, a podcast about local government. I'm Lauren Palmer, partner with EverStrive Solutions, and your host for this episode. GovLove is produced by ELGL, the Engaging Local Government Leaders Network. And you can support GovLove by joining ELGL and take advantage of incredible professional development opportunities like Kamp GovLife, the 2025 ELGL Annual Conference in Santa Rosa, California, coming up this October. Join me and the entire group of amazing camp counselors to learn, grow, and make memories with fellow public servants. Visit elgl.org today to learn more and secure your spot. Also this year, we are celebrating 10 years of the GovLove podcast. Help us commemorate this important milestone by calling the GovLove hotline at 720-282-1752. That's 720-282-1752. Leave us a message with your favorite GovLove memory or your prediction on the next 10 years of local government. You just might be featured on an upcoming episode of GovLove. And now on to our show. My guests today are John Kamp and Leah Fisher. John is an urban and landscape designer and the founder and owner of Prairieform. He's the co-author, along with James Rojas, of the book Dream, Play, Build, which explores hands-on ways of infusing more fun into community engagement. And Leah is a built and natural environment analyst for Clackamas County, Oregon. Today we're talking with Leah and John about how they use play-based community engagement to build trust with community and integrate equity into transportation planning in Clackamas County. John and Leah, welcome to GovLove.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, really glad that you both could join us. I'm looking forward to our conversation today. But of course, we're going to start with a lightning round to get to know both of you a little bit better. So Leah, I'm going to start with you. What is the genre or era of music that best describes your personal style?
Well, I'm a millennial, so I have to say like 90s, early 2000 is really music. Alternative rock is really where my happy place is. But I like a lot of different types of music. I enjoy country music. I grew up in the country growing up and had a solid reggae phase in college, and just enjoy kind of anything upbeat and happy.
Okay, awesome. You've got some eclectic picks there. John, what about you?
Okay, well, this is a tricky one too. I'd say first off, probably shoegaze music from like the late 80s, early 90s. There were all these British bands like Ride and Slowdive and Live Lady Valentine that were like hugely formative for me when I discovered them back in the day. And then probably house and techno because I DJ and I spent house and techno and started going to raves in the 90s, and those were really formative experiences for me as well. So, and I could go on and on. I'm a big audiophile, music head, so it's hard to condense all of my musical interests down into one. But yeah, those probably sum it up decently well.
What a great question. I'm glad I asked you. I did not know we were going to pick up this fun fact that you're a DJ on the side.
Yes, and we do workshops, actually model building workshops, where we merge DJing and model building.
Very cool.
Perhaps there'll be a window to talk about that during the conversation. We'll see. We did not do that in Clackamas County, but hey, it could be fun to do in the future.
Maybe next time, something down the road, right? Or maybe one of our listeners will pick up on it.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. John, we're going to let you take this one first. What is something you are reading, watching, or listening to that you want to recommend to our listeners?
God. So I think, honestly, I feel like the show The Bear is something that I would recommend to people.
I have not seen it, but it's on my list.
It's a mix of... Okay, well, I mean, I think because one of the characters is Chicago, so it's very city related. I mean, they don't formally make Chicago one of the characters, but it is, and Chicago is my favorite city in the U.S. And the show has a reputation for involving a lot of screaming and yelling, and then there is that, but it's also a very human show, and it's very much about human beings and the complexity of human beings and their lives and their interior lives. And they tell the story in a way that's not cliched, so it's not like it starts low and it gets crazier and crazier and crazier, and then it explodes. They really kind of break that down and explode it, so the pacing is very surprising and varied. So I'd say that. Yeah, it won't be everyone's cup of tea, but I feel like if you can get through the first couple episodes and all the screaming, you'll be into it.
That's good advice. Like you got to power through a little bit to see if it's really for
You do,
you.
yeah.
Okay, Leah, what's your recommendation? What are you reading, watching, or listening to that you want to share?
Well, I'm definitely a nonfiction reader when I do read, which I don't always have time, but I actually am reading a book right now called The Body Keeps the Score, and it's a New York bestseller. It's by Bessel van der Kolk, and I might not be saying his name right, but I'm kind of reading it for both personal and work reasons, and I'm finding it pretty fascinating. There's still like so much to learn about our brains, and it's so interesting to me that I mean, traumatic experiences can literally reshape both how our body and our brains work. And I just don't know if we've really acknowledged that kind of at this point in, I don't know, in health and in behavioral health. And so I definitely recommend it for anyone that's interested in kind of understanding more about their own lived experience. And then if they're in a profession where they're serving folks that are particularly vulnerable, like the houseless community or people with substance use disorder, it's just really interesting and kind of just understanding kind of some of the reason of why people are where they are. And so, yeah, I'd recommend it. A little more on the serious note,
No, that's
but
okay.
it's
I'm
good.
impressed that you are a nonfiction reader in your spare time. My husband is too, and I'm always like, how can you sit down and read like a heavy academic book at the end of a long day? I just want to read
It's
like
true.
some garbage fiction, but
I think that's probably why I don't read a lot as much as I would like to.
yeah,
So,
okay, impressive. Okay, one more lightning round question. I'd love to hear from both of you. What's the best piece of non-career related advice that you've received? And Leah, will let you go first.
thanks for this question. Gosh, I wish there was something that like came to the forefront of my mind. But I think when I think about this question, I think about just the different role models in my life and just people I've observed or heard from kind of overall. And one thing that's really resonated with me is just really taking advantage of life and living every moment to its fullest and kind of like not having any regrets. Pause. Are you guys hearing it echoing back or is that just me? Shoot. Okay. Okay, good. Okay, so I'll start again. Okay. Sorry, I got distracted and then it's echoing, so I'm a little distracted. So I think just really taking advantage of what matters most in life. Some people get really wrapped up in their career and like reflect back and wish they had spent more time with their family, or gone on those trips that they wanted to go on, or to do an activity that maybe they're too old to do now. And so I just really try to um, balance my work and my life and my personal life, and take advantage of every moment as much as I can. Thanks.
John, what about you? What's your best piece of non-career related advice that you've received?
I think the advice of not comparing yourself to other people is really important. That has been for me. I've always kind of marched the beat of my own drum. I'm a creative person, but I don't like really dress the part. Like I feel like people have this idea of like a look that you're supposed to have when you do artistic work or music work, and I don't really dress that part. I'm kind of a clean cut guy, and but for the longest time, I thought there was like a look that you were supposed to, that I wasn't doing it right, right? Like that, I'm not a real creative person because I don't look the way you're supposed to look. And I think getting past some of that and not comparing yourself to other people has been really helpful to just be like, this is just who I am. Like, this is how I do it. This is how I go about it. This is my approach. Um, with landscape design, I didn't go to school for landscape design. I went to school for urban design. And I think early on when I started, people who had degrees didn't take me seriously because they thought, well, you don't have a degree, so you're not a real landscape designer. You're not a real landscape architect. So, but I think those things are really, if you want to do something and you're committed to it and you care about it, you'll do it. And sometimes it's almost better because you're not hemmed in by the ways in which things are taught. So yeah, so that's kind of been the story of my life. I marched to the beat of a different drum and gone about things in my own way, and slowly learned to just not be like, well, they're doing it this way. Why am I doing it? Maybe I should bend and conform and do it in the way that most people do it. But I honestly don't think we'd be doing the work like James and I would be doing the work we're doing if we had done that, right? If we were to do that, or if that was our MO, where we bent and conformed to how everyone else does things. Because I think what we're going to talk about today, about community engagement, we do it in a totally different way. It's completely different, and that I think is very much born out of the fact that both James and I are kind of similar in that way. Where we just sort of see things in a different way, approach things in a different way, and just how we see the world through that lens.
It's awesome. I think that's a great segue for the rest of our conversation. And authenticity is definitely a theme that we kind of celebrate in GovLove and ELGL. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. Well, let's get into the heart of our interview. I'm very eager to hear more from both of you about the creative approaches to community engagement. Leah, we're going to let you start. I always like to just give our guests the opportunity to share a little bit more about their background before we get to the topic of the day. So maybe start by just telling us a little bit more about Clackamas County for people who may not be familiar with your area.
Definitely. Thank you. Yeah, Clackamas County is one of the kind of the three counties that make up the Portland metropolitan area in Oregon. For people usually know Portland, keep Portland weird. So that's kind of our main hub in Oregon. Landmass wise, Clackamas County is about the size of the state of Delaware, or about 1,800 square miles. I know sometimes numbers don't always resonate with folks. So we're a pretty large county geographically. And we lie within the Willamette Valley. For folks who like Pinot Noir, we're very famous for our Pinot Noir in the Willamette Valley. And then we're also within the Cascade Mountain Range, so specifically Mount Hood. And so there's a lot of really great diversity in our landscape. We have beautiful natural areas. We have lakes. We have rivers. We have a little wine, a little bit of wine country in our county, and then we also have some pretty urban areas and cities. And so, as far as a county goes, we're a real mix of urban, suburban, rural, and some of these really wild areas that not many folks are actually living, but it technically is within the responsibility of Clackamas County government. We currently have a population of about 428,000 people, and home to a pretty diverse range of industries. We have a pretty strong manufacturing industry. We have healthcare, tech, a lot of agriculture industry in kind of the southern part of our county. And then, as I mentioned, because of Mount Hood and some of these other really great natural features, we do have a pretty healthy tourism industry as well. Some things, like I think from a government perspective, as I mentioned, our Department of Transportation, which is kind of the department we'll be talking a little bit more about lately, they have a pretty big job, right? They're having to manage and maintain our transportation system across this quite large geographic area, in areas that are very rural, other areas that are quite urban. And so they have a big job. They, to give an example, they have to manage and maintain 187 bridges and about 1,400 miles of county roads. And then I think also from a community engagement standpoint, as a government entity, we have a lot of challenges just reaching people where they're at in all these different corners of our county, and really reaching out to them in a way that they'll be interested in participating and providing feedback, and that we can kind of meet them where they're at. So we definitely have a lot of assets as a county, and then we have also a lot of challenges as county government, making sure that we're serving everybody in the county and we're investing across the county equitably. And so it's a little bit about Clackamas County.
Great. Thank you for that background. Everything that I know about the area, I learned from the series Portlandia. So you exposed me to some different perspectives, and I appreciate that.
Yes. Yes.
So we want to hear more about you. Tell us about your career path and how you landed in your current role at the county.
Yeah, happy to. Let's see. I've been working for a while, so I'll try to keep it as short as possible. I really started my career as a urban planner. I was super passionate about the environment. I was passionate about creating vibrant and healthy places for people. So after I graduated from Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, California, which is a great school, and working as a community planner at a consulting firm for about 3 years, I kind of began to realize the role health was playing in our built environments. And really, from that work and work with my colleagues at that firm, really developed an interest in going back to school, maybe getting a master's in public health, just somehow more formally integrating that into kind of my work. And so due to some other life choices, I moved up to Portland with my partner, and who's from the area. And we chose a terrible time to move. It was in 2009 during the recession. And so I was not able to find a job in planning at that time. And so kind of made the choice for me. I ended up going back to school. I went to Portland State University and got my master's in public health with a focus on management and policy, really with the intent of integrating health into my work as a planner. So I was actually never my intent to work in public health. However, just kind of as I learned more, this new kind of professional world opened up to me. And I had this opportunity to work more on the public health side, which at the time felt like a really good fit and a really positive next step. So after I graduated, I took a position at our state public health entity, which is the Oregon Health Authority. And fortunately, I was able to work in one of our departments that really focuses on chronic disease prevention. So really does, I think about the built environment. And my role in particular was more focused on policy and systems and how they affect health. So it was a really interesting and like kind of growth area of not just like how we're building or laying out our land uses and kind of what we're building, but really thinking about also those policies and systems that impact our ability to move around, our access to healthy foods, the air quality, the air and water that we're being exposed to. So it was a nice pairing of kind of my planning background with now this public health side. So more life changes led to career changes. I had some children. I ended up shifting gears a bit and ended up working at a nonprofit, really leaning more into the community engagement work and specifically empowering community groups and community members to create livable and inclusive communities in Portland. So it was a shift from like working at a state level to then really being community based and really in the weeds with community doing work. So it was a really cool opportunity and a different perspective and really helped to build some new skills. And it was really during those years I went through my own personal journey and professional journey of really learning and unpacking the role that the planning profession and others had in like excluding Black, Indigenous people of color from living and accessing land in Oregon and property. So really understanding the harm and the history of things like housing segregation, redlining, exclusionary zoning, and a lot of other things that really directly and indirectly harmed a lot of our communities. So, and we'll talk more about that later, to kind of led up to the work that I'm now doing in Clackamas. So yeah, I really feel like all of my background, education, and experience in public health, planning, social justice, community engagement really positioned me nicely for this position here at Clackamas County, where I've been a couple years now, about 2 years this summer. And I'm really able to use all of that in my role. And so I'm super fortunate to be working with amazing colleagues and mentors that help me kind of continue growing and learning. But it's been a really fun, positive experience in the last couple years.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing your background. So tell us more about this really unique position that you're in that's jointly funded by public health and transportation. Just give us more of a sense of your duties and responsibilities.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yes, it's such a unique role. And actually, my position at Clackamas County really came to be because of the passion and the dedication of one of our transportation engineers in DTD, which is our Transportation and Development Department. And he really felt that transportation had a real role in protecting community safety and health when people are moving around the county. And he felt strongly that it required collaboration with our public health department to do it well. So it was really through his advocacy and what he refers to as his diplomatic persistence that the position came to be. And as I mentioned, it's 50% funded by our Department of Transportation Development and 50% funded by our Public Health Division. And it's been in place for about 5 years now. So there isn't a roadmap necessarily for how this position should work. There aren't a lot of examples out there of what we can look at and kind of pull from. But I'm super lucky that I have the support from my managers and my colleagues in the Department of Transportation and Development and also Public Health as we kind of figure this out together. We work through it together, we collaborate together. So I would say, on the day to day, my overarching responsibility is to integrate health values, concepts, and priorities into our transportation plans, our processes, and our different projects that we might have. As I'm able to do that, kind of taking a health and all policy approach, so kind of just finding the spots where I can interject and support throughout these processes. And I sit on a lot of different transportation committee or different technical advisory committees. I sit at a lot of different tables in our transportation department and in our public health department. So I'm in a really great position to kind of make connections, share information across like our departmental silos often that we get into and kind of breaking those down. I'm able to share a lot of our public health data that we have and make sure that that's able to inform different transportation projects and just overall able to help integrate, health and health equity into our different projects. And again, would not be possible if we didn't have the support of all of the staff and the leadership in transportation, because a lot of it is just them creating the opportunity for me to be part of the projects and the processes. And so you have to have that collaboration and that trust. So relationship is really important.
That's great. Thank you. We're going to let you take a little breather so we can hear from John. John, you kind of gave us a teaser of your background in urban planning and then kind of making that transportation into landscape work. Just tell us more about your career path and how you started with your work with Prairieform.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I also have a background in environmentalism and environmental activism. I got involved with that when I was really young. I was in eighth grade, I think, when I started. Yeah, no, I was in eighth grade when I first got involved with that and got involved with the Sierra Club, and then eventually got involved with the student run arm of the Sierra Club. So that was the through line for a long time with my work and my extracurricular world and all that. But I also never wanted to. I always was trying to, like, from early on. I've tried to engage people in environmental issues in a way that's not like this hit you over the head approach where you just bombard people with bad news. So I would try to come up with ways in which we could engage people in ways that were playful or fun or silly or ridiculous and had some kind of comedy element in them. So in college, I started this anti-global warming marching band, and we would play at different protests. We would like march around campus and engage people in global warming, but by way of music and dance and being silly. And there was a kind of satirical element to it as well. And we would do things like dress up as different states of the union, and then we would like get a bucket of water thrown at us or like a pail of sand thrown at us just to demonstrate different effects that climate change would have in these states. So that's like always been a part of the work that I've done. I guess that's just in my DNA, to kind of like engage people in this kind of goofy, playful way. And then I also around that time got involved in critical mass bike rallies. I lived in Paris when I did my study abroad junior year. I lived in Paris, and I had known about critical mass bike rallies before, but these were these big bike rallies where people on bicycles would get together and they would converge somewhere in a city and just bike in the street along a route. And the whole idea was their tagline was, "We're not blocking traffic, we are traffic." And that movement really predated a lot of the bike infrastructure a lot of our cities have. And it was a response to the fact that we really didn't have good bike infrastructure in our cities, and that cities were really by this point had been really created, sculpted, redesigned around the car and less around human beings and people on bikes. So I did critical mass in Paris, and I actually ended up making the flyer for critical mass when I was there. Unfortunately, this is a podcast, so I can't like flash it up on the screen, but maybe that could be something that there's a link to or something so people can see it. But anyways, and that was also like part of this whole thread, I guess. The flyer is very playful, and it's like collage and a little satirical too. And we said some goofy things in it. It's all in French, but I could translate it for folks if they need the translation. And then I wrote my thesis on critical mass bike rally. I ended up writing my undergrad thesis on critical mass bike rallies and as a social movement. And then I think it was really through that I discovered Jane Jacobs. I discovered a lot of people writing about public space, exploring public space, rethinking public space, cities, looking at how much space we've devoted to cars, how much space versus how much space we've devoted to human beings, and how that's really changed over time and gone from one side to the other, and looking at how cities can play a role in reducing people's, I don't think we called it a carbon footprint at that time, but just reducing people's impact on the environment. And that was really new at the time. The environmental movement struck me, I think it was a very kind of suburban, rural movement. So you had a lot of people who thought the ideal environmentally friendly life was to live out in the country and have a wood stove and drive everywhere. And yeah, that was like what you're supposed to do. And I would be on these calls talking about how creating walkable streets and walkable cities and transportation that's accessible and fun to use and efficient and all those things. Like these are things that can really cut down our impact on the environment. And then that kind of led me to planning school. Basically, I think that's I don't want to go like month by month into it, but that's basically how it, I think, led me to planning school. And then I went to UCLA for planning and urban design, and then I worked as a city planner and urban designer for the city of LA for 2.5 years. I ultimately felt like I wasn't outside enough, and I wasn't doing enough for the natural world. So I thought I was going to go back and get a second master's in landscape architecture, but I ended up forgoing that because it was going to be so expensive. I got into the schools I applied to. It was going to be like over $100,000. So it's a long story, but I was living in Mexico at the time. I had left my planning job, was done with that, wanted to do something different, was in this kind of transitional time, living in Mexico, living with a family, studying Spanish, doing something totally different. And after I had gotten back from visiting these schools and realized like, I don't want to do this. This would be so expensive and so similar to my undergraduate degree. I called my parents up and asked them if I could move back in with them and just do it on my own, just start up my own business. And this was also around the time where Leah was saying that she moved to Portland around that time. This is when I started up my business in 2008, so recession time, terrible time to start up a business. It didn't really hit the design professions. The recession didn't hit the design professions until around 2010. That's when things really slowed down. So I did a whole bunch of different things to stay afloat. But what I was doing the whole time was design build, basically. I mean, I would design these landscapes and then I would build them. So I was learning about all the layers that go into landscape creation instead of just learning about the design, because that's a lot of what you learn in school is just the design, but you don't actually get your hands dirty. And then I was learning how to run a business too, which I had no clue about, zero clue about. The best advice though that I got about that was that you can have the best designs, but if you don't have your the business side of things down pat, and you don't really focus on that, it doesn't really matter if you've got great design. So that was really good advice that I got. And then yeah, right. I mean, you can have a great website, you can have all the nice business cards and all these things, but if you don't have if you're not building a network and you're not building relationships and you don't have all the inner workings of your business ironed out, it can be really hard. Um, but anyways, fast forward to, I don't know, like when would this be? Around, well, it would be like 2012, 2013. That's when I started doing work really looking at how we could change landscape design and do landscape design where we're not using irrigation systems and we're responding to climate change and creating landscapes without irrigation. And then that's why I came up with this concept, which I called the irrigation free landscape at the time, and now I call them climate scapes, which sounds way better. And I think it really encapsulates more of what they are. But I got public funding from Watershed District here in Minneapolis, where actually I am right now on vacation at my parents' house. And then in the basement, actually, I'm in the basement. I'm at my old desk.
Oh my gosh.
Like
It's like full
mission
circle
control.
moment.
Yeah, mission control. I'm at the desk where I used to work in the basement. Those were some rough. I will be honest. Those were, especially in the winter. Those were some rough times. A lot of darkness. Um, but anyways, I got public funding to do this pilot project where, and so it was from the Mississippi Watershed Management District and then one neighborhood council in the city of Minneapolis to do a pilot project where I would create a landscape in a front yard that was publicly accessible for viewing, and each plant would have a number, and I would monitor how much water each plant needed to get established, and then I would generate a set of data, so I could really say, like, okay, not like this general, like, oh, water this plant once a week for the first summer, but really be like, no, like this plant only needs to be watered 4 times, or this plant only needs to be watered once, or whatever it is, because there is a lot of mumbo jumbo out there around drought tolerance and these kind of sweeping generalizations about plants and what they need. Anyway, so I did that. I got the funding. We did that. We made an interpretive sign, which was along the sidewalk, so you could walk past and you could look at the interpretive sign and learn about this landscape and then see it. And then I did a training there on this new approach that I had created to landscape creation, which involved like planting plants in a certain way. And sorry, that was you can edit that out. I got to close my email. So it involved planting the plants in a certain way and watering them in a certain way, prepping the site, so all these different things to get them to the point where they could be on their own. And then I ended up moving back to California and taking this concept with me to California, as I wanted to see if you could do it in the Mediterranean climate. The on the side of all this, and I think to get us to the point where we're talking about what we ultimately did with Clackamas County and Leah and hands-on community engagement, is that James, my partner, he had been doing all this model building work and these model building workshops, and we started doing those when I was living in LA still. This was in 2005. We started doing these hybrid DJ and model building workshops where I would DJ and people would build. He'd lead people through these model building activities in his art gallery in downtown LA. And at that time, I really just thought these were like just a fun thing we did. They were just like an urban planning party. They weren't something we could. These methods were things we could use for actual planning work. But then over time, we started doing more and more work together. We did a model of the city of Minneapolis. We made a model of the city of Minneapolis for this all-night art event here in Minneapolis called Northern Spark. So we kind of merged my landscape and his urban planning and I guess my urban planning knowledge, we created this model, this interactive model of the city. And we had that up at the Science Museum, and we were there until like 5 in the morning. And then eventually we started doing projects together, like urban planning projects together. And that the first one we did real formally was in like 2018, I believe. And I had actually been teaching on the side at the time, and this was it was a pretty big. The budget was a decent size. I mean, now like looking at it, I'm like, oh, it really wasn't that much money. But I was like, okay, I'm gonna leave my part time teaching gig, and we're gonna do this. So that's what we did, and started doing our model building work and merging some of my design background and some of my facilitation background. I also have a background in facilitation and trainings. I was the trainings director for the student arm of the Sierra Club for 3 years. We trained students in how to be effective activists and organizers. So I was able to merge those skills with all these other things. And then James, coming from his urban planning background and model building background. And then we started just getting more work. And then we wrote our book, Dream, Play, Build, and basically during the pandemic. We proposed it, pitched it to a couple publishers. Island Press was the second publisher we pitched it to, and they were like, yeah, we want to publish this, which was amazing. And then the pandemic hit, and I had an excuse to basically stay home and write a book because you couldn't go anywhere. Anyways, and so I don't want to take up too much time with the backstory, but we can kind of fast forward up to now. And we've been doing all these projects since, some with landscape design and starting with a model building workshop and translating those outcomes into design, and then building that. We're doing a park project in Oakland right now in California that's called the Frog Park Climatescape, and so that really builds off of the irrigation-free landscape work that I did and these model building workshops and so on and so forth. And we're doing work with DJing and model building and so on and so forth. So there you go. There's it's like a very annotated, but still felt like too long. Yeah.
But tell me, I guess just segue from that, like tell me, just kind of explain like how it works. Like your work promotes, and I'm quoting here from your website, like truly meaningful discussions between citizens and planners. How do you achieve that through play? Like kind of give us the mechanics of how it works.
Basically, what we're doing is instead of engaging people through language, we engage them through their hands and their senses. And the whole idea is that those methods fire up a different part of your brain, the creative part of your brain. It's not survival focused brain. So in a typical community meeting format, when you engage people through language, the part of their brains that's fired up is the prefrontal cortex, and that's the part of our brains that keeps us focused on ourselves, on survival. It's the least creative part of ourselves, essentially. And that's why people tend to say the same things at community meetings. I want more parking. I don't want traffic. I definitely don't want new development. I don't want density. But if you change the rules of engagement and you engage people with their hands and senses, that part of their brains isn't fired up. Instead, it's the creative side of themselves and the sensing side of themselves, the emotional side of themselves. So they're able to access all of these creative ideas, aspirations, core values that don't have anything to do with parking and traffic and density. So that's at the core of what we do, why we do it, and how we engage people. So we'll have people build models, what they want to see. So people build models of a favorite memory, and then we'll have people build models of an ideal space or place, and they'll do that as a group. We do these sensory-based walking tours. We'll have people explore space or place with their senses. But out of these activities come a set of creative ideas, core values, shared values, things that can then be really useful. Like in the case of the transportation plan in Clackamas County, we get this rich set of information that we otherwise wouldn't get because people aren't fixated on just parking and traffic and just kind of humdrum things.
Now, before we let Leah tell us more about the project in Clackamas County, when we had our conversation to prepare for the interview, I was telling you, like, I'm kind of a linear thinker, I have a hard time kind of getting my mind around it. And you did a really good job of explaining to me kind of your process of converting feelings and values and memories into meaningful content for the plans that you're working on. And so I wanted you to just elaborate on that a little bit for our audience, kind of how this process still gets you to a useful deliverable at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, so this is a very common question that we get, and understandably so. Basically, all we do is we just document everything that people are saying in buildings, and we document that by way of having people share out what it is that they've built. So, in the case of Clackamas County, we had people build models of their favorite memory of a mobility experience. So that could be everything from, riding on your dad's shoulders when you're a kid to learning how to ride a bike to everything between. And we have them share those out, and then we'll have them pull out the recurring themes of all those memories, and we document that. And we do that because we want people to start to see that they have things in common. So even though we might be from different countries, we might speak different languages, we have different cultures, we have all these things in common. And then when we have people build an ideal space or place, so in the case of Clackamas County, we had them basically build places they go to or wanted to go to and how they want to get there within Clackamas County. So we had them build a model of that. And then we would have them share out what they had built, and we just document it all and then take them through a similar activity where they would pull out these recurring themes of the models. And those recurring themes can really serve as these core guiding values for the project as it moves forward. And then the ideas themselves are these really creative ideas that you can include in both the beginnings of the project and as the project moves forward. Some of those ideas will be more implementable than others, but within the ideas that are maybe on the surface less implementable are core values, aspirations, bits and pieces of things that you could actually implement. And that's really important. We don't want to set parameters and say, don't build these things. We want people to have free reign, and partly because we want people to feel like they're valued and that their voice really matters, their ideas matter. And just, with the topic of this podcast and GovLove and improving relations between everyday folks and government, this is a really good way to do that.
All right, Leah, well, tell us about the project where you use this play-based engagement in Clackamas County and why you chose that engagement strategy.
Yeah, thank you. Well, the origin of the project was, no surprise, some new transportation planning rules that were kind of coming down from the state. So we had a very specific task in front of us, and it started really with an analysis of the history of transportation and land use policies and different decisions that have impacted a number of our populations that historically we've not had involved in these projects. So the state was really specific about the specific populations we needed to assess, analyze, and then do better at connecting with through these transportation planning processes, specifically our transportation system plan. And so, some of those populations, not all of them, include, folks with low incomes, Black, Indigenous people of color, immigrant and refugee communities, people with disabilities, youth, and like I said, some others. So through our analysis and work with some of our community organizations, we identified these four key issues around community engagement related to this history and kind of who lives in Clackamas County now. And those four key issues were that there was an overwhelming need to build trust between these priority populations and county government to do effective community engagement, right? If we look at the harm that government has done through different policies and things, there's just not a lot of trust. The second was government needs to take the time to really understand the context of for these communities when we're engaging with them. So we need to there's a whole lot to unpack there that I won't get into. But the third is relationships are absolutely essential, and building those relationships takes time and it takes ongoing investment that may be outside of a single project. So we're working on our transportation system plan right now, but when we're done with that project, we need to continue to invest in those relationships and maintain those relationships long term. So really understanding the importance of that. And then the last thing is that we really need to empower, like the long game is really empowerment for these different priority populations. And so bringing them up to a level, or being part of bringing them up to a level where they're able to engage regularly without the barriers that they've faced. And so that's a longer term goal that came out of this analysis. And then from that, we developed a framework for engaging these priority populations in a way that began to address these key issues and look at, not just what one project manager can do in their planning process, but what other changes within our department that need to be made, and within our county that need to be made, and culture change and all of that. So a lot of thought went into that framework. We vetted it with some of our community-based organizations that serve priority populations, and so we wanted it to be kind of that guiding roadmap as we now are in our transportation system planning process that we look to. So we had this requirement, we did this analysis, we came up with this framework, and we had a really great opportunity to kind of pilot some of these recommendations that had come out of the framework, kind of start a little bit of the implementation of this framework for engagement. And I had attended, and a few of my other colleagues had attended the Oregon American Planning Association conference that John and James had presented out with their concept of this play-based approach. And so we remembered that. We thought, we have this grant from the state to be able to do this work, try some new methods, pilot some of these new ideas. And so it was kind of like all of the stars aligned, and we were able to go ahead and do that. And we were fortunate that John and James were available. They were willing and able to be part of that. And so we planned 3 different workshops in different parts of our county. As I mentioned, it's quite large, so we were trying to be really thoughtful and intentional about connecting with our priority populations, or our historically underserved populations, and kind of reaching these different geographies across our county. We intentionally co-hosted with a community partner, because again, that was part of the recommendations, is working with a trusted partner. So we were able to do that with 2 of the 3 events, and we were able to pilot, like you said, pilot a lot of the recommendations that came out of the framework. So it was a really cool experience and an opportunity for us. And I would say one other kind of asset or opportunity it presented is that, I mentioned my role is a shared role, 50% public health and transportation. We were also able to pull in more staff expertise and connections and relationships from our public health team into the project, because we had the resources to do that. So that was also kind of a test for us internally, is bringing in some of our epidemiologists to help with the analysis, and then some of our community health liaisons who have connections with community to help plan these events and host these events. So it was a really cool opportunity to be able to test some of the recommendations of this new framework.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned, your work with community-based organizations and partners. What other strategies did you use to ensure that your workshops were successful?
Well, like I said, we were super lucky. We had resources to kind of try a number of things and really have the resources to do it well. So we were able to offer stipends to our co-hosts, so not just utilize their connections and their relationships, but also compensate them for their time, their expertise, and their spaces. We translated our materials in advance, and we offered simultaneous interpretation at the events, which does get expensive. And it was kind of an interesting experience because I think at one of the workshops we had 4 different interpreters going at the same time. And so it was kind of a new experience for us as the county to coordinate that and also think about how we can set that up for success. Um, and then we were also able to have just a really nice meal at our events, which people always love. In many cultures, food is a love language. And so just meeting people again where they're at, making it fun, making it light. We were able to offer a $50 gift card for participants. And, really, it was these types of incentives that I think really helped to bring people in. And I absolutely do not think we would have been able to reach the folks that we did without the support of these incentives, without the support of our co-hosts or the community organizations that helped to do the recruitment. Our community liaisons that work in public health were able to do some of our translation for us, but also work with different communication outlets to be able to get the information to the folks that we were trying to reach. So we had a lot kind of set up in advance to help us be successful, and then having the resources to be able to really test all these different recommendations was a really really great opportunity.
So, Leah, this work sounds really incredible, and you all did a lot of thoughtful work to make sure you got the level of engagement that you wanted. What were the outcomes? How did you measure the success of trying a new strategy like this?
Yeah, great question. Our kind of general metrics for success, or what we talked about would be success, is if folks from our underserved communities showed up, of course. Did those folks, or did they have a positive experience interfacing with government on, in particular, a really nebulous topic like transportation planning, which is pretty hard for a lot of folks. And did we collect, as you kind of mentioned earlier, did we collect useful information that would actually inform our transportation system plan? And then were we able to expand our reach long term? So did folks just show up for that one event, or did we successfully kind of hook folks or get them interested and willing to then be on a communication list and take surveys in the future, or participate in continue to be engaged in this transportation planning process? So that those were kind of the purpose and what we hoped would be successful. So yes, folks showed up. We had about 17 to 25 participants at each of our 3 events. And nearly all of our participants indicated on our demographic form that we did at the end that this was their first time attending a government meeting on the topic of transportation. So we had a lot of first time folks. We also were able to reach participants we don't typically reach. So I looked back at our demographic forms just before this, and we had a quarter of participants who identified as having a disability, 50% who identified as being a refugee or immigrant, and about 75% of participants who spoke spoke a language other than English at home. We also reached, by and large, a younger demographic than we typically see at some of these events. And we collected zip code and contact information so that we could be sure we're reaching kind of, again, that geographic diversity, and also stay in touch with folks. Did they have a positive experience? We didn't ask specifically, but I would say the energy in the room, the smiles, the fact that people actually came back to us after the event and made sure we had their most appropriate contact information so we could stay in touch with them in the future, to me was a sign that yes, people had a really great experience. And so that was wonderful to see. The energy was really positive in the room. And we were able to use the information that we had collected from community at these events, because it was categorized into themes, and we are going to be integrating it into our transportation plan to inform our goals and our vision for that project. So we are absolutely using the information. And then lastly, not it's a little too early to say, but we have contact information for all the participants. We are planning on looping back with them, and we've identified some folks from each of the sessions that we feel will be kind of sort of an advocate or a liaison for the transportation plan, to share information with their community, to really stay in touch, maybe be invited to be on an advisory committee. So we feel really hopeful that it's a sustainable sustainable contacts were collected and that people will stay involved when otherwise we just wouldn't have had their perspective at all. So we felt overall it was successful. Um, and we'll learn more, in the coming years as to
Yeah,
how
more
well
to
it was.
come. That's
Yeah,
interesting. Congratulations. I mean, it's
thank
hard to
you.
get people to participate, and it sounds like you all had really good success. And I love that you're thinking about kind of the outcomes over time instead of just the immediate output.
Yeah.
Well, I want to turn back to you. I'm really fascinated that you told me you've figured out how to apply these concepts in a virtual setting. So how can play-based engagement work on a Zoom call?
Yeah, so during the pandemic, obviously we had to pivot quite a bit. And what we ended up doing is having people, instead of us providing found objects for people in a physical location where we all are, we had people use objects from their homes or their offices or wherever they were, and they would use those. Yeah, and then build. So they would use things like paper clips and cutlery and all sorts of things, all manner of things that they could find and use those then to build their models. The big difference is that because people were, well, at that time people were isolated as well. People were socially isolated. They had to isolate themselves from other people. So we had for the second activity, which we normally do in groups, where we have people build an ideal space or place, that they did on their own in that era. But now, that's not the case. People can be in the same room together again, so we can basically just do the same thing, right? Except as we do in person. Uh, so everyone could be in the same room, and James and I could facilitate from afar. We could facilitate a workshop from afar, where they have objects that they've collected, or they might have objects that we've mailed to them, which we do sometimes, and then we'll just facilitate that workshop in a virtual way. So it's possible and doable, and it is I will say it is second best to doing it in person. It's much more effective to do it in person because you also it's better for forging social bonds, better for establishing a sense of trust, and you get this spillover at the end of the workshops when we do them in person, where people talk a lot with people they may have just met, talk a lot with folks from the planning department or the Department of Public Health or whatever it is. And that part's really important and really valuable, and something that happens less if we do it virtually.
Well, we are running out of time. I could listen to you two talk about this all day, but we got to keep it within our radio podcast time frame. So I'm going to ask each of you just if there's anything else that you want to make sure you share about this work before we wrap up.
Well, yeah, there's so much more detail that I'd love to share, but I know time is short. I think what I'd conclude by saying is that we need to start thinking about how we do things differently. And anytime we do things differently, it's uncomfortable. And discomfort, I think, is hard. And I think, in particular, for government entities that are often particularly risk averse. So I would say it's okay. Like embrace the discomfort. Give yourself and your staff grace that, hey, you're gonna maybe try something new. It may not work the first time, or may not work how you want it to work, or may not look the way it's always looked before. But that actually means that you're doing it different. And if we don't start trying new things, we're not going to get different outcomes. And I would add a play based approach doesn't actually necessarily have to cost any more than your traditional engagement approaches do. It's just different. I know I talked a lot about the incentives and kind of add ons we were able to offer. And and that is always a bonus, but I don't think it precludes governments from trying to do things differently. So I would just say embrace the discomfort, embrace failure, right? That means we're learning and growing.
That's how we innovate.
Yeah.
Absolutely. John, what about you? Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think that we it's not kind of similar to what Leah was saying, but we wrongly think that if we just put together the right presentation and we make it really good, and maybe we have it in multiple languages, and maybe we have real-time interpreting, that's good, right? That will change the outcomes in the process. But you're still engaging people through language, and you're still causing them to fire up the non-creative parts of their brains. And you're also, a lot of times, we didn't talk about this, but you're setting people up to have to speak in public, and people's fear second to death, number one fear second to death, is public speaking. But we've set up democratic processes in which the requirement for participating is to speak in public in front of oftentimes poker-faced boards of people who give you no sense of what they're thinking. And that makes people even more stressed out. So you're limiting the number of people who are going to even want to participate. And then the people who do participate tend to be a certain kind of personality that's just okay with potential conflict, that's not afraid of public speaking. So you really have to change the rules of engagement so that A, people are allowed to be creative, but B, people are doing something that they feel comfortable doing and not something that they're terrified of doing. And having people get together around a table and build with their hands is just that. And people really like working with their hands. It's very primal. It's very fundamental to who we are. And by the end of the workshops that we do, people feel a sense of like lightness and possibility because they've been working with their hands, and they've been working with their hands with other people. And they've been coming up with all these possibilities by way of this activity.
Well, I'm so grateful to both of you for joining the podcast and sharing more about play-based engagement. Leah, as we close out, one final question for you. If you could be the GovLove DJ, what song would you pick as our exit music for this episode?
I was hoping I wouldn't have to answer this. I don't know. You're the DJ.
Oh, that's right.
John, why don't you?
John was the DJ. I might have put him on the spot. All right, John, you're on the spot.
Yeah, John.
What do you think?
I'm pivoting.
Well, I mean, there's a classic track, When Will I Be Famous by Sascha Funk. He's a German house techno producer. I feel like that would be a great track to close with. You can
Okay, I love it when people suggest songs that are new to me. Like, okay, I can't wait to hear this. Thank you for coming up with one on the spot. Well, that ends our episode for today. Thanks so much to our guests, John Kamp and Leah Fisher. Thank you for listening. You can reach us at elgl.org/govlove or on social media at GovLove Podcast. This has been GovLove, a podcast about local government.